And I remember getting home at like 12 or 12:30 that night, and my parents were like, "Where the hell have you been?" And I was like, "I don't know. I was at some shows." And I remember, I never forget, my dad said, "Well, that'll be the end of this show business." Little did he know, I'm doing the same thing 20-something years later.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was the Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000s New Jersey punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Mike Pelak didn't run a label, play in a band, record bands, own a record store, print merchandise for bands, run a zine, or promote... Okay, wait. He did help promote shows with Bomb Shelter, run by Ricky, the Artful Dodger Supporta, which we will talk about later on. I'd always see Mike at a lot of shows that my band Landmeyer played at, and he just had such a positive and happy demeanor about him. He'd always be in the crowd singing the songs back to bands, and then he'd hop in a car with some friends and go to the next show and that same night, and sometimes making it to 3 or 4 in one weekend because the dude was just a giant scenester, and he loved it. I wanted to see what it was like from a quote-unquote fan perspective, so I reached out to Miguel and set up a time to talk, and this is what we chat about. Flipside Records, high-strung change in his life, his tour around New Jersey checking out old venues, how it never took too long to get to different towns to watch shows, the Juliana Theory show where they unplugged random Tasks amps, the ecosystem we built by accident, why the size of Jersey made it such a good scene, his thoughts on what caused the shift in the scene from good to different, the Bomb Shelter team, how he and Dave Flores from Taxicab Samurais tried to revive promoting shows, when ska went away, his stint at Sci One Dummy, what would it be like to go back to venues now and just have a beer, and a ton more. This episode and the next episode will be the last time I'm going to promote the Landmeyer Humble Beginnings Jettison show on July 21st at Devonhart Music Hall in Teaneck, New Jersey. However, this time I have an important announcement. It's sold out. Totally fucking with you, but imagine if you were planning on going and found out that was true. No, the actual announcement is that we're going to end the pre-sale, which is $15, and it'll be $20 at the door. We are going to end this next Friday, July 20th, day before the show at 5 p.m. So if you want to get pre-sale, make sure that you get it before next Friday. To make sure that this doesn't happen, head over to thiswasthescene.com, click on the purple button that says click here to purchase tickets, and get your tickets. As always, thank you to the people who have donated to the podcast. If you'd like to do so, just go to This Was the Scene, and at the top of the page, there is a donut button. It helps with the $20 a month to keep this thing alive, blah, 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 blah. If you want to help, great. I just want to tell it to people every time they hear this. Also, I've officially added merchandise to the website. If you want to check that out, also, it's on that page. And I can officially announce that the pre-order is live for Stories for the Big Screen, which is my first band, Landmeyer's record, being put out on vinyl on I Surrender Records. Thank you again, Rob Hitt, for this. There's a bunch of cool stuff about it. It's limited to 250 copies. It's remastered. It's on green vinyl. There's an etching on one side that says, "God, I miss you. God, I miss this place." And it's the only place you'll find the cover of With or Without You that we did. And I think there's some more stuff. Yeah, the back has like a collage of pictures and crap like that. If you'd like a copy, just go to isurrenderrecords.com and click on Landmeyer, or you can go to thiswasthescene.com. Again, I have a lot of crap there apparently, and you can click on the thing that has the whole info about it. You'll see the Landmeyer record and so forth. The release date of the record is July 20th, which is the day before the show, which is pretty cool, and we will have copies of this record at the show for sale, along with merch that we're going to sell, Landmeyer merch. So yeah, that should be cool. Last thing before we jump into this, if you are around or in Clifton, New Jersey tonight, July 13th, Friday the 13th, that's when this podcast is launching. If you're around or in Clifton tonight, you should go check out the show at the Clash Bar. That is all I will say. Feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who you know would love some nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. Before we start, Mr. Pelak, because at this point I would have recorded a new intro explaining what this is about.
Okay.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
It's hot as hell out.
Are you in the Jersey right now? Are you in Canada?
I am. Yeah, no, I'm in Jersey City. My wife is from Canada, but she immigrated on down here a couple of years ago.
Nice. Welcome. Welcome to the land of opportunity and stealing children. This is very topical right now. In a couple weeks when this comes out, it'll be old news.
Mm-hmm.
What have you been up to, man, in Jersey City?
Oh, man, I'm working for a large insurance company doing underwriting. I know it's super punk rock.
Sexy.
But also, kind of working on my own stuff still, and just finished shooting a film, and been doing a lot of screenwriting and kind of trying to work all that stuff on the side.
Yeah, I saw that. What's the name of your film?
So it's called The Delivery Man, and had a couple of actors that I hired for it. I wrote it, had Chris Lesperance shoot it for me. Dave Flores helped on it. Frank Iero did the score for it.
Oh
So it
wow,
should be a cool little film. Just trying to submit it to some festivals right now.
that's cool, man. Is this something you've had in the works for years, or is this something that's kind of new?
The film specifically, or filmmaking in general?
The film specifically.
The film specifically, no. We shot it last summer. I came up with the idea like last spring, and knew that I wanted to shoot something small, something cheap, and we shot it last summer, and it's been just a long slog through editing and all the
Yeah.
post-production stuff.
Yeah, I've done editing for just a minute video or 2 minute videos, and that could take a week. I can't
Yeah.
imagine an hour, 2 hours of, and then
Well,
color correcting and audio and
this is
all that
only
shit.
9.5 minutes.
Okay. It's only 9.5 minutes, really?
It's a short film.
Wow, Jesus, I didn't know they were that short.
No, yeah.
Wow, that's cool, man. Is this were you into, and we'll jump in the interview shortly, but were you into this stuff as a young buck, or is this something you've developed over time? Because I know you did. I remember you had a part in the My Chem video years ago. Weren't you trying to get involved with?
Yeah, well, I was doing some acting years ago. That was what originally brought me out to LA.
Yeah.
Whatever, I ended up working at Side One Dummy, and ended up right back in music, even though that was the catalyst that, sent me on the road out there. And, I gave up a little too quickly, ended up working in music again, and then, eventually went through the army and then came back here. But all the while I've still had that, that thing tugging at me. And, it's now's as good a time as ever.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. So for anyone listening, Pelak, as we'll call him, or Mike Pelak. I've done all these different angles of people's, their story of the scene, the Jersey scene in the late 90s, early 2000s, and from bands, from recording studios, from, I was going to say label. I don't, fuck, I'm like on 15. Did I do a label? Do you know? I
Not
forget.
yet.
Yeah, I know.
Still need
Okay.
Jay Turon. Jay.
Yeah. No, I think it's just because I've been trying to do labels. I've been trying to do pinball. I reached out to Stein from Umbilical. Yeah, and I haven't really found one yet. But I've got Anthony Annoyance from Annoyance Zine, and I'm actually looking to try to connect with. Remember Brian Malloy?
No.
He had a zine called like Much to Do About Nothing. It was more of a, it wasn't really a zine about the scene. It was more short, like short stories. You don't remember this at all? He used to give them out in like Wayne.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah, he did a bunch of short stories, and then Kelly, Annoying Girl, I wanted to try to get her. So I was looking up all these different things, and I was like, man, I really want to get someone who was went to shows, and that was like, from a fan's point of view, I feel like that's a shitty way to put that. Someone who attended shows that wasn't in a band, wasn't involved in the music side of it. Does that make more
Right.
sense? Is that like the better way to say it? Like, someone who attended shows a lot, but you all later on did get involved, but you were quite a staple in the scene. So I thought it would be awesome to kind of get your perspective of what it was like back then.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's kind of the intro to anyone listening of, where we're gonna head with this. But so to start off, man, as I ask everybody, it's what initially got you involved in music?
Well, kind of following the same thread as a lot of other people was the Seattle grunge scene, and it was Nirvana and it was Pearl Jam, and we were, me and a couple of friends in high school were into that, and ended up becoming friends with some of the older kids in high school. We were, I guess, in 10th grade. They were in 11th or 12th grade. And these guys listened to bands like the Misfits and the Vindictives and Anti-Flag, and it opened up this world, and it was kind of the intro to the world.
Yeah.
I had never heard of Anti-Flag or, Die for the Government before, and it was this whole thing that was, as great as Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden are, it's something about it spoke more to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of the fateful day was my friend Tom McGreevy was shopping at Flipside one day. I know you know Flipside.
Yep.
And Flipside used to have the free bin, where if you bought something, you could grab something out of the free bin, and there was always piles of stickers and demos and patches.
That's right.
And it was like a garbage pail by the floor. And he picked up a High Strung demo, Something Has Changed.
Yeah.
And, that was Jeremy and all those guys. And
Jeremy Hernandez from Humble and Sticker, and I think that was it. Yeah. And
Bigwig.
And all his thousands of bands now, and Bigwig, yep.
And he brought that home, and we listened to it, and it was just like, fuck, like, these dudes are from, like, I don't know where they were, like Hawthorne or somewhere in Bergen County there. And it almost followed that same thing that a lot of other people have talked about, where we opened up the tape and there were thank yous, and it was Congress of Cow, and it was Humble Beginnings, and it was whoever else. And we, found what was probably a GeoCities webpage at the time with show listings or whatever. And then
what year was that? Because I felt High Strung came into the picture a little later on, from like when we started playing, High Strung kind of came in about a year after that.
Yeah, this was 97.
Okay. Oh wow. I guess was it 97? Jesus. I thought they came in like 98. Yeah. Okay. But so you're at Flipside and you went through the bin. I remember my buddy John Price, I think they found this band called Chooch. Do you remember them? Do you remember hearing about them?
I know the name, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that I think that they found it in that bin. And that thing, it was that random where some of them were a miss, but some of them just led you on this whole, holy shit, this band's actually good. And then for you, that was literally what got you going to the scene?
Yeah, dude, that High Strung tape changed my life.
Really?
Yeah, it kind of realized that there is music that's not being played in arenas. There's music that's not on the radio that you don't have to go to, the Meadowlands to go see live.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, was there something tangible about these bands, these punk bands, when it was either the sound that attracted you or the message, or was it the fact that you felt that it wasn't so gigantic like Pearl Jam? And when we'd watch these videos, and I'd always felt like I was intimidated by those videos that they were like, I was like, man, this is like a stadium, or there's this big club. I don't know. I feel like I would get my ass kicked there. And it just seemed overwhelming.
It was the accessibility, I think, that first hooked me. The sound was great. I loved it. It was fast. And I mean, truthfully, a lot of the songs back then were, written by people our age, and it was 18-year-olds singing to 17-year-olds. It was the things that they were singing about, whether it was you're pissed off at school, you're pissed off at your parents, you're pissed off at the girl who won't talk to you. Nirvana wasn't talking to that. Pearl Jam wasn't speaking to that.
Yeah.
The kids around us were.
That is funny because I guess the message was different from the bigger bands. Like they were talking on a bigger level. It felt like it did feel like they were talking like on a non-tangible. What the hell's the word? You couldn't. It's like you couldn't. Yeah, because you couldn't really connect with it. But there was something about the punk songs that were about girls or something local that you're like, shit, this is happening to me. This is happening down the street or in my school or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, once I went to my first show.
Yeah, where was that?
Oh, December 6th, 97 at the Hawthorne American Legion. And it was Edna's Goldfish, and I think Humble played, Right Turn Eddie, Creeping Dead Charlie's. And it was just like, wait, the band is, it was kind of like the next progression from, oh, not all live music is in arenas, to now I'm at this Legion Hall and the band is standing on the floor in front of me. There's no stage, or if there was a stage, they weren't playing on it. And then the dudes from the band put down their stuff and were selling their own t-shirts. And it was that level of, I guess, equality that was so cool to me. It was just something I couldn't imagine experiencing. And I think I bought a Right Turn Eddie tape at that show, and it was like I could go home and listen to this Right Turn Eddie tape and say, I just saw them with 150 kids going nuts last night, and they're playing tonight at Skaters World.
Yeah.
And I could go to that.
And yeah, it's $5 to go, and it's down the street.
Yeah.
So your first show, did you go there? You get the High Strung tape, and did you go by yourself?
No, a mutual friend, Jamea, brought me.
Okay.
Her and her older sister. Her older sister could drive at the time. Neither of us could. And she brought us to the show. We actually went to another show directly from there at Skaters World. And so this would have been 97. I would have been 16. And I remember getting home at like 12 or 12:30 that night. And my parents were like, where the hell have you been? And I was like, I don't know. I was at some shows. And I remember, I never forget, my dad said, well, that'll be the end of this show business. Little did he know, I'm doing the same thing 20-something years later.
That's amazing. Yeah, you grew up in West Milford, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember. So what year did you graduate?
99.
Okay, so you were 2 years younger than me and all the other Jefferson kids.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, you were like 1 year younger than a couple of my buddies. But yeah, because we when did you and I meet? Because was that in it was obvious shows, but I can't remember specifically when.
Well, just to
yeah,
it was basically at that show, just to kind of wrap up that piece was.
Oh yeah.
I remember Ben Jorgensen booked that show, and I don't know if it was one of the bands called him out while they were playing, like the, hey, thanks Ben for, putting on the show, whatever. I remember looking at him and he was like fucking 14 or something.
Yeah.
At that time. And I thought, wait a minute, like this kid just put this whole thing together. And that was also kind of the next, thing that propelled me. And so getting into where me and you met, I'm not sure the exact moment, but that following July, I booked my first show and you guys played that.
Where was that?
It was at the West Orange Legion. And it was you and Humble, Mohawk Barbie, the Jerk-Offs,
yep.
Furious George.
Yeah, I have pictures of that. Do you remember that kid Matt who used to follow around Right Turn Eddie? He had like dreads and he had a Fish Sucks shirt. It was the fish logo, but it said ducks. There's a picture we have. We were I think it was at that show, and I forget who was playing, but there's Punk Rock Elvis. I talked to him about him recently in another interview. So Brian, he would always show up at these shows. He found this white suit at a Salvation Army and put patches on it, and he got a cape. And for some reason, he called himself Punk Rock Elvis. And I think it's because his collar was popped. But there's a picture of like him giving Matt like a piggyback ride around the show in the crowd. I swear it was at that show. And yeah, I remember that was like one of the best fucking venues.
I loved it.
It was so small, and just and there's an interview I just did where they're talking about like the parking lot. And it was just kind of funny because it was like, oh, I love the parking lot. But there was something about that parking lot that was just such an awesome hangout spot for some reason. Because it was also hot as fuck in that small-ass place.
Probably about 2 or 3 years ago, I spent like 2 weekends and I made a list of venues from back then, mostly halls and whatever, like old places like the Palace and whatever. And I drove around and like visited all these places and just like took photos of the outside.
Wow.
And unfortunately, the West Orange Legion is like closed down and dilapidated. I was looking in the windows and it's like trashed in there.
Oh my God. So it's like literally closed down. It's not even a Legion Hall
No,
anymore
I don't think it's even
or
a
a
Legion Hall
VFW.
anymore.
Oh my God, that's so sad. Yeah, I was talking to one episode. Barker went to, and it was whatever was the skaters or the skating rink in West Orange.
Oh, JT's, yeah.
JT's, yeah, that's the same thing. It's just this abandoned place. I think you can go
Hmm.
inside and it's like all broken and fucked up. It's weird that is the Wayne Firehouse still around? I mean, well, the firehouse. I mean, I'd hope that they still have a fire department there.
Yeah, that place is still it looks like I've driven past every now and then. It looks like it's still alive and kicking.
It's all lavish from all the giant amounts of money they probably made.
They made money hand over fist from us.
Do you know? It was a conversation I had in actually another interview recently that hasn't aired. But what was like the average cost of renting one of these halls? Do you remember?
I mean, I feel like it was obviously it depended. If I recall correctly, I think the West Orange Legion was, everything was like a 4-hour block, and it would maybe be $200 and maybe $50 to add on a fifth hour or something. It was low cost enough that, I mean, at least I know for that first show, couldn't have been more than 100 and 150 people there, and I know I paid every band, I paid the hall, I paid the dude from Creeping Dead Charlie's who did sound for me.
Yeah.
But it went up to I remember the early days of the Wayne Firehouse, it being like a $600 cost, and it just by the end when they realized that they could make a lot more money, it became a lot more expensive.
Really? Well, I mean, that was the place where they had the biggest shows. Now the Drive and Alkaline Trio and Get Up Kids are showing up there. There's and they obviously had no idea who the hell those bands were, but they would just look at the number of kids that were being dropped off by their parents and then flooding the parking lot. That radar's got to go off on. All right, we got to really tap into this. But so before you did the first show in West Orange, like how long were you going? After that first show, between that and the West Orange show, like how long? What was the amount of time between those two before you were like, I want to start getting involved in this?
It was like 7 months past, and I went to that first show in December of '97, and I got my license. I turned 17 in January, so I got my license right after that, and then it was on, and I feel like I was going to 3-4 shows a weekend. I mean, we'd look for something on Friday night and go to a show, and then find a Saturday matinee, and then a Saturday night, and then if there was something on Sunday, and just go all over the state. I mean, it was like I was 17, my friend Tom was 17, Jamia was 16, and we were just in a car and completely unsupervised driving down to South Jersey, Central Jersey, all over the place to wherever there was a show.
So you would show up at shows and then in the middle of one, or I mean, you couldn't just leave a show because they would end kind of late. I mean, but in the middle of one, would you leave and then in that same night go to another one, or would it just be Friday was one and then Saturday was another one and then Sunday was one, or you were saying that you try to do like 2 in one night?
Whatever it took. Like if there was a Saturday afternoon show, there was a show Saturday afternoon at the West Orange Legion, we could hit that show, and then that night there was a show at the Lyndhurst American Legion, we could hit that show, and then maybe Sunday there was a ska show at the Cove in Roselle, and we could hit that show then.
I think there was this kind of, it was right around, it was a sweet spot, we were all in high school. Do you feel that you were part of that crowd in high school that just couldn't find your group, or did you have like that group you hung out with?
I mean, I had a couple of friends in high school, but yeah, I never felt like I was home until I went to that first show. I mean, I feel like by the time I walked out of that first show, I had found my tribe, for lack of a better word. I felt like I found my people at that point. And like you were talking with Josh Humble, like you went back to high school after that, and it was just fuck all these people. And, I never had felt like I don't want to say that I never fit in, I had friends and stuff, but I never felt like I had my place until I found the scene.
Yeah, it was almost you walked into high school with the mental giant fuck you to everyone without really walking around. And almost your fuck you became the band t-shirts that you'd wear.
Oh, for sure.
You'd sport that and people were like, what is that? You're like, don't worry about it. You'd let the right people in. I mean, yeah, because we would like when we were in high school, it was like towards the end. I think these kids in high school, it was like for Halloween, they called themselves posers. Remember, like poser was like the big word back then. And one kid dressed as like a goth kid. He had like a raincoat on, put black eye makeup, and was running around the halls like pretending to be like the goth kids. And the goth kids all dressed preppy. It was hilarious. But this one kid, he had the ball necklace on. He looked like a punk rocker. And then after that day, he actually started coming to school with Rancid t-shirts on. Rancid t-shirts on all the time. And it's like, then they started kind of listening to that stuff, and we were so pissed off. Like, no, you're not allowed to wear that. Like, that's ours.
Yeah.
You wear your fucking football jersey and your stupid number, and this will be our jersey. You can't be involved in this.
Yeah.
But I feel like it was a sweet spot right around that time, like you said, because you go to the first show and you get your license, and you're in high school. You're trying to fit. We all had, definitely all of us had this passion for music, which we didn't really realize until we finally heard it. And then we're getting our licenses. And Jersey is such a small state that it's very accessible to get to all these places. It doesn't take 3 hours to get somewhere. It could take 30 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour at max to get to any of this thing. So I think it was this kind of perfect storm to just like where we were living at that time,
Yeah, for sure. And I think it was kind of, there were, I guess, a couple of bigger clubs in Jersey, like Birch Hill and whatever else was around back then. But I definitely echo Steve Jaworski's sentiment in that I barely ever went to the city for a big show.
Yeah.
I don't think I went to Roseland or Irving Plaza until probably 5 years into listening to this music. I always would have preferred to go see Humble at the Lyndhurst American Legion than No Effects at Roseland.
Did you feel it was just because you could walk in there and bump into people that you knew, and I hate to use the word safe, but it was just familiar?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
there was something intimidating about the city. The city was just intimidating in general, but the clubs I thought were more.
Yeah. Yeah, you didn't know what you were getting into, and I could go to a show here and you got to know everyone, and you knew the bands, and you knew the kid putting on the show, and your friends were there, and it was just so much easier. Yeah, it was safe. It was safe and it was easy, I guess.
Did you find that whole 7 months before you kind of got involved in the promoting shows, were you meeting new people? Like, did you find your group of friends that they were? Because it was you and Jamia, and who else who were you hanging out with?
Tom McGreevy. Yeah, I mean, I guess
you feel like it expanded, like it kind of the group that you had kind of. Maybe like it wasn't all of you in the car going to different places, but you'd show up and it's, you're like, oh, hey, there's you and you and you, and you'd all kind of get together as a group at the show and hang out.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. I can't remember who anyone was, but I definitely remember, like, I mean, this is 20 plus years ago now, but yeah, I mean, I feel like it was always fun to walk in, especially in North Jersey show. And you walk in and it just felt like you knew half the people there.
Yeah.
Those became my friends.
Wasn't the guy who had like blonde hair, it was like he had like a beard. He was always standing in the front in all the pictures. Wasn't he part of your group? Do you know what I'm talking about? He was always standing in the front, always singing along to all the, and I thought he was like part of the whole West Milford crew.
Are you sure it wasn't me?
No, you didn't have a beard. You definitely did not have a beard back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, fuck. I have to look this up. Yeah, there's a bunch of people back then that, I mean, I would see them all the time, and then, I mean, sometimes I just never knew what their names were.
Yeah.
I always felt bad. They're like, hey, what's up? I'm like, hey, you. I'm such an asshole. I should know your name by now.
Well, you can always get away with a quick handshake and a hey, how's it going?
Yeah. It's so bad though. So you did the West Orange show, and then did you did you book a lot of shows before you got involved in Bomb Shelter, or like?
I mean, I wouldn't say a lot. There were some sporadic shows. Another one that sticks out in my head that you played also was it was at the Teaneck American Legion, and it was the Juliana Theory and Lane Meyer and Penfold and maybe Joystick.
Is that when I talk shit about Juliana Theory?
I don't know, but I remember that singer was a complete dick.
Yeah, there was a show that they played. I think it was the Wayne Firehouse.
Yeah, I remember something happening at that one.
Random Task. I think it was them they played. They played, and the singer got up and he was unplugging their amps.
Mm-hmm.
And and then Evan came up to me. I think this is, if I can remember this right. I think Evan had mentioned it to me before we went on and played. And I get up there, and this is like when we had Casey in the band, and I think Chris was out. I think we might have had Brian in the band. But I was so pissed off, and I was like, yeah, sorry, we're gonna, we might go over, but we don't want to be like any of those fucking bands that walk around and unplug people's amps, like fucking assholes. And I remember Casey looked at me, he's like, nice, dude. I was like, what? I was like, fuck that band. I was so pissed off, and I think I looked over. I could swear it was Evan, but he kind of like gave me this smile of like, yeah, motherfucker, like fuck you guys. Yeah, I just felt like protective of those guys. I was like, I hated bands that showed up and just had these attitudes, like, I don't know, they just like were the shit. Just kind of bothered the fuck out of me. But so when you actually, and it was funny when I was writing the questions down for you, I had not planned about any Bomb Shelter questions, but I was like, oh fuck, I actually can ask you, because it's like I like the fan the just the music lover perspective who showed up at these shows, and you're like, we're going to like for a weekend and just in doing this. But then when you got into promoting it, like when you started going and you did your first West Orange show, was that did it kind of like this thing get plugged in your head of, man, I want to be a part of this, where like I want to put on shows, or I want to be in a band, or I want to do a record label? Did that come from going there, and then and it just turned into you did promotion, putting on your own shows?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like it's the DIY aspect of the scene, where I think I saw that you didn't have to be in a band, because I picked up a guitar about 3 times in my life, and I was awful, and I had no patience to try to learn it. And I was much happier just being the guy that brought the music to people, and going to see the music and being a part of it in that way rather than playing it. It was like kind of that DIY thing where I saw I can do this. Shit, I'm losing my train of thought here.
Like you can contribute in some way. Like how can you give back to something like that?
Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of entrepreneurial. I have a kind of an entrepreneurial mindset to begin with, that, if I think I can do something, I'm just going to go do it and just figure it out. And the scene really put that kind of mentality into me of this could just be done and I could just go do it.
How did you like putting on shows? Did you find that you were balancing it out where you were putting on more shows than you were going to after you got the bug, or did you put on one and then wait a while and then like go to more shows?
Yeah, it was more of that. I wouldn't say I was like a regular promoter or anything.
Yeah, I don't remember. I remember you just sometimes showing up there. I was like, oh, Pelak. And it's like, yeah, I put the show on. But I remember that was, some faces that were familiar. Like Ricky, you'd always, like he was always putting on shows, and then Josh from Bigway was putting on shows. But you were kind of like, it's like you were like, yeah, I did this one. But you're like, I'm gonna go back and I'm just gonna show up at other shows because I like to do that more.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was always a lot more pressure when it's a show that you're doing, because there's money on the line and all that stuff. But I never did it to make money or anything like that. I don't think I ever made any money. It was just, I did it because it was, I can put on the show that I want to go see. I mean, the best shows that I can remember, were always some sort of combination of Humble, Lane Meyer, Bigwig, Mohawk Barbie, those bands. So it gave me the way to say, hey, I feel like watching all these bands in one night, and so I'll just do it.
That's awesome. I never thought about that. It's like, oh, let me just bring them to me in one spot. And then, did you ever make any money?
No, I was always happy to pay the bands.
Yeah, so
You
it's
know,
it, so I guess you didn't get like that it's like I could bring them all in one spot, but I won't make any money, but that doesn't fucking matter because it's all gonna be in this one room, and it's like, wow, this is exactly who I want to see one after the other.
yeah, I was happy to like fuel the economy basically, and I looked at the scene too as this little economic bubble that a
Hmm.
bunch of people who were like 16 to 21 created. We really created an entire world within a world. There was the label guys, there was the zines, there was the promoters, there was the bands, there was the fans, and it was this like self-contained economic force that just kind of moved around and just devoured and just got bigger and bigger and just was like a self-sustaining thing.
Yeah, and it was like a magnet. It was this. I think we all found out about it the same way, and all of a sudden it did start to grow, where it would just be more and more people. But when they showed up, they were the right people.
Yes.
It wasn't just some outside perspectives walked by and they're like, "Oh, we're just gonna go in this thing and fuck it up." I felt it was always the right crowd with the same mentality, and we all felt the same way.
Yeah, well, you had to work to find it. It wasn't catching a Facebook post and you could pop over to their, Bandcamp or whatever and go to a show that way. Like, you had to work. You had to work from finding the bands to, finding out about the shows to, finding the directions to get to the show.
Yeah,
It was every step of the way was work in a way.
that's so true. That's so fucking true. It'd be you'd get like directions written down on a piece of paper, and you'd show up in Bernardsville or some random town in the middle of the woods. Like where the fuck it's like make a left by this gas station, not the first one, but the second one, and then you go down. And there's this white house. You got to make a right past that, and you're in this neighborhood, and you're thinking, there's no way there's something gonna be here, and it would just open up, and there would just be this hall or firehouse or some random shit, and you're like, how does this even like work being here?
Yeah, I always thought it was funny too that, people would always put their phone numbers on flyers too, and it would be like, for more info, call, whoever at this number. And it was always, no one had cell phones, obviously, so it was always like their parents' phone number. And it was always really awkward if you had to call this number to get these directions because there was no MapQuest. And,
Yeah.
it was kind of that interesting thing that would never happen again today.
So when I would go to shows, it was because I got to be lucky enough to play them, or I forget honestly when we weren't playing like how I'd find out about shows. But it's like if I wasn't involved in having Sean just tell me to show the fuck up, or meet at his house first, or give me directions, in the beginning, I wouldn't have. It would have been harder for me to find. But for you, like, where did you go to find out where the bands are playing? Like, where would you get flyers, or did you have other ways to find out about shows that weren't flyers?
I mean, I think it was almost entirely flyers, and outside of every show, there was always someone handing out flyers for the next show.
Yeah.
There was always someone at shows handing out flyers. I've kept every flyer to this day, and I put them in binders about a year ago.
Really?
And yeah, and I think there were a few show pages. There might have been like the geocities.com/NJ shows,
Yeah.
where there would be like a show listing online, but probably 95% was just getting flyers. And occasionally you show up to a show that you have a flyer for and there is no show. And it's something got canceled along the way, but there was no real feasible way to disseminate that information. But
Yeah, and then
you
sometimes
just
that
kind
would
of rolled with it.
and that would turn into people getting together. It's like, well, it's 7 o'clock on Saturday. Do you guys want to go to a diner or a playground of a school and hang out and smoke butts? Or it was just we'd figure it out, like something to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like outside of that, or people would always show up and it's like it would be in the parking lot and then the show would be done or whatever it was, or it didn't happen, and someone would just they just crank some song in their car, and then we'd all sit outside of it and just like bullshit for an hour. or like a mall parking lot. I don't understand why I'm remembering all this.
Yeah, I always love just driving somewhere and getting lost. That was
Yeah.
just, we're just gonna get lost driving around here and figure it out. And there was no way to get unlost until you found your way back to a highway that you knew the number of.
I think when we first started talking in in this interview, there's always some random thing that gets triggered, and I think that's why Jersey is such a good scene, is because it was so compact. Because if you think about Pennsylvania, all the cities are a decent amount of they're far away from each other, and it was also Pennsylvania fucking blows. But but like New York State's really big, and then the city is just the fucking city. But Jersey was really small, and the towns were close enough that when you did get lost, it wasn't really that much of a big deal because you could just find 46 or 80 or 287 or the Parkway, and then from there it could lead you back home.
Yep.
But I feel in other states, because I'm in North Carolina now, and it's so huge that if like I'm in Raleigh, and it's like if I was growing up here, I would just be in Raleigh. But to go to Durham, that's like a 30-minute drive, and then Chapel Hill could be 40 minutes. But then after that, it's an hour and a half to get to Greensboro. It's 2.5 hours to get to Charlotte, 2 hours to get to the beach. So there's nothing close enough where it kind of spread out. And I think maybe that would have been like the power to New Jersey being such a fucking epicenter.
Yeah, I mean it's probably a little off topic, but I mean you've toured and driven the country. I've driven cross country a bunch of times, and there's not really anywhere else around where you could drive for 2 hours and hop from town to town to town to town to town.
Yeah.
Without having that spread out thing of exactly what you're saying. Most of the country, it's going to be an hour until you're to the next 3,000 person town.
Yeah, or just life.
Yeah.
It's just highway, and then yeah. I mean, I think maybe that's why Chicago did so well, because Chicago is just this huge suburbia in mixed with the city, and there's so many places there that I felt they kind of had that sense as well. But it wasn't the state of Illinois; it was just Chicago.
Yeah, and LA is that way too.
Yeah, I fucking hate LA. Yeah, because you lived out in LA for a really long time, didn't you?
Yeah, well, 4 years.
Did you ever? How old were you when you moved up there? Like, what year was it?
It was 2004, so I was 23.
Did you notice that was around the time where things started to kind of shift? And you went out there and you were working for Side. I don't want to jump into that. I don't want to go that far, but you went out there for Side One Dummy, right? Or did you end up just getting a job there?
No, I ended up getting a job there probably a year after I moved.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I don't know. Now, I mean, there's a lot of bands back in 2004 on, like Brand New and Take Back Sunday that I really like, got into probably around 2006 or so. But yeah, that was a weird time to be out there. I don't know. So
yeah.
I mean, you being involved in a label, I mean, you got to see it firsthand. What was like the shift?
I feel like to keep it in terms of Jersey, which maybe was kind of the catalyst into the shift of the whole scene, but I felt like where I saw the shift in 2 points. One was probably the first time New Found Glory played in Jersey.
Yeah.
Or maybe not the first time they played in Jersey. The first time I saw them in Jersey, it was a show in Springfield at the Springfield Elks Lodge, and I don't remember who else played, but I'm almost certain Bigwig and Midtown played. It was probably one of the first Midtown shows, and it was definitely it was a bomb shelter show. And I feel like they showed up, and it was whatever show they were supposed to have got canceled, and they just wanted to jump on. And I feel like they played 4 songs and just like blew everyone's mind.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was kind of one of those moments where they turned into, in my eyes, I don't know if it's true for everyone, but in my eyes, they became kind of the ambassador and like the link from the scene into what pushed it more towards the mainstream.
Yeah.
I mean, we know they became workhorses, and they were practically a Jersey band for a while. They were playing here so much.
Yeah.
But I feel like they were the first band that I remember seeing, like maybe along with like Thursday, a video on MTV.
I think it was what was the first record? Something Gold or
Nothing gold can stay.
Yeah, Nothing Gold Can Stay. When that came out, I remember when I first heard that. No, they were in a comp and I heard it, and Matt Redleader played it for us, and he had this great intuition of knowing what bands were going to be huge, and he always called it, and he goes, "This band's going to be gigantic." And I'm listening to it, I go, "Is that a girl singing or a guy?" Because their demo, the first, Jordan has a high voice, and I loved his voice. Later on, not that much later on, but before Nothing Gold Can Say, I felt like there was a track on there, and they had it released as a comp, but it was so high. I'm like, wait, this is a girl punk singer? Like, what is this? He's like, no, it's a guy. I was like, I don't know, dude. I don't really hear it. And then they came to Jersey a lot, and they'd show up at Hawthorne or Lyndhurst. They played, I think, a show at Lyndhurst, and I think it was Lyndhurst. But then you're right. They just showed up, and you're like, wow, these guys they're kind of paving this new road. That there was that kind of connection between what we were talking about in the beginning, where there's the local scene, which was, you can go up to these guys during the show and you could talk to them and you could drive home in 10 minutes or whatever. And then there was the giant shows, like, the Pearl Jams and stuff. I felt like they were kind of that bridge between that local to the big. And they were like, anyone wants to follow us, you got to work your fucking ass off, and it's going to cause turmoil.
I felt like once they sort of pierced that veil, it just, it opened the floodgates for all those other bands.
Well, then you also had the labels that saw it. And then you have the labels were the business. And this is really before Napster really broke out, right? Because Napster kind of happened in 98, 99? Kind of?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Before that was a thing. That was a worry. So record labels, Drive Thru came through, and they were business. And I think they saw, and labels like that, and Victory and Vagrant, they saw, wait a minute, let's put our attention there, and let's find the bands that we know can blow up, and let's push them. And then we'll keep finding, and then we're like, wait, they're finding local bands. We can get signed, and then that's what caused that big rift. Like, did you see that all when you're doing Bomb Shelter shows? Did you start to see that there was a different attitude with bands towards the time before you stopped doing that?
Yeah, I would say as those shows grew, and I think it was just kind of the bands also grew sort of organically together, but at a certain point there started being, and again, this goes into the business, and bands need to be a business, but suddenly it was more than, hey, you could give us a $300 guarantee, great, we'll be there. And it turned into, well, we're going to fax you a rider, and you're either going to give us a $25 per diem each, or you're going to supply a hot dinner and, one case of craft beer and one case of this. And
was that real? They really, they were seriously asked for that shit?
Oh, yeah. And they were asking for that stuff at hall shows.
Did you ever just look at who was involved in Bomb Shelter? Who was the whole crew?
Obviously Ricky was the brainchild of it and did 98% of the work.
Yeah.
And he did all the booking really and all that stuff. And there was a group of us who more or less helped out mostly, whether it was with flyering or on the day of and stuff like that. And it was, me and Jamea and Pete Johnson.
You guys would keep it organized. You would help keep, run the door and all that shit, inside.
Yeah, it was running the door and making sure the stage wasn't falling apart. And, it always took 6 of us to clean the bathrooms after it because they were so disgusting.
Oh, that's fucking gross.
It was horrible.
Oh God, I didn't know that anyone would have to do that. That's fucked up.
Oh, dude, you have 600 kids coming out of the Wayne Firehouse all dripping sweat. Those bathrooms are pretty gnarly.
Oh my God. So was ever a band that you heard about that was playing that night, and then they were like, yeah, you got to hear what these fucking guys asked for? Do you remember? Does any particular band or thing that was asked stand out to you? You're like, what? They're asking for this?
Not that I think was completely outlandish.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever truly, served up everything that was on those riders. I felt like it was almost almost like their way of a negotiation where it's like, we're going to ask for all this shit. And if you give us like some sandwiches and beer, we'll probably be happy.
Yeah. We're just really hungry, like really hungry because we're so broke.
Yeah, and I mean that stuff was going on, as those hall shows got bigger, that stuff was going on, and I feel like then even the local scene sort of took a turn where I remember, I'm not gonna name a name, but there was other promoters out there who wouldn't let you hand out flyers at their shows, and it was just like
Got kind of dirty.
everything started to become a little like over competitive. Some of that original feeling of the scene and everyone was a community and working together, it kind of started to unravel, I think.
Yeah, it's like you kind of see that across anything where you get enough people involved and they just blow it up, but then after it goes away, like the true people still stick around.
Yeah.
Like with skateboarding did that, and then there was rollerblading was a huge thing. There's people to this day they still rollerblade,
Yeah.
aggressive skate and all that shit, and you're like, wow, you're still doing that? Like that didn't kind of come and go. But there's just something with human nature that we just gravitate towards something and then just make it, and the wrong people get involved or the wrong attitude gets involved and just destroys it. But then when the smoke clears, they're gone. It's like they came in, they destroy, and they leave, and the people that initially were there were like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
What happened?
Now we have to pick up the pieces of our lives again.
Yeah, and like, are we still gonna, we're still gonna keep doing this? I mean, I didn't get to see it completely end because I left. We got back from tour, and I think we had another 6 months, and we were just kind of fizzling. I was just so mentally drained, and then Brian left, and I was like, dude, I can't fucking do this anymore. And so that was like 2000, was like April, I think, of 2000, and no, it was 2001. And so I left by that September, and I came back to Jersey in March of 2004. So there's this whole gap where I didn't get to see everything start to end. Like you were there that time. Like how did that start to kind of fizzle out?
Well, I think it all blew up before it fizzled out. It wasn't really like, I don't remember it as being a fizzling out. I remember it as blowing up so big and it just like burst. Like I think it just burst, and a lot of bands broke up and venues shut down, and there was no more Wayne Firehouse because they weren't doing shows anymore. The West Orange Legion wasn't doing shows anymore. Places were getting shut down, and everything kind of just ended. I mean, I feel like it just ended.
How old were you? Because we were let's see. When I was supposed to, you were 20 in 2001, right?
Yeah.
So so between that and then you went out to California, what year? 2004.
2004.
2004. Okay. And so in that whole time, you're going to shows, you're helping out promoting it, but were you also, and then were you going to college at that time or school? This is because the Army came later.
Yeah. No, I was like half going to like community college. I didn't have like a regular kind of college experience, but
yeah,
there was a couple of years there where me and Dave Flores tried to sort of revive things a little bit and start booking shows again. And it was just, we had some good ones, and we had a lot of kind of dud shows where just people didn't show up, and we were losing money, and it was just like, well, this sucks.
Because so at that point because I'm just trying to like just paint a picture of, because leading up to this, when you first started, you're going to a couple shows every weekend, a couple in a day, and then this thing really starts to explode, and then you're involved in shows and promoting them, and then the bubble bursts. And then did you find that where it was kind of like, well, fuck, man, my weekends are shot now? Like, was it that abrupt, or did you kind of just one day go, it's been a couple months, I haven't actually like seen a flyer, I haven't, my lifestyle has changed where I'm not going to as many shows as I used to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure everyone else would have their own take on it, but in the way I remember it, it just stopped. I'm sure there were still shows going on. I feel like by that point there was like the Bloomfield Ave Cafe and Hamilton Street and whatever else.
Yeah.
There was other people around. Like, it wasn't like there were no shows happening. it just wasn't the same shows. And I feel like Lane Meyer was gone. I don't know, around when Humble was gone. A lot of those, what I would refer to as like the original bands in my mind, weren't playing anymore. And it just, everything just stopped, that in my view.
Yeah, actually, to think about it too, because I mean, when Boxcar stopped, they turned into Burn West, and then it was a different mentality where people just putting music on or writing music just to write it and not to do anything with it. Where the newer bands weren't trying to go somewhere. They were like, well, we just want to keep playing music. We're gonna have a new name and new songs. And people showing up are like, yeah, but we don't want to hear your new band.
Yeah.
Like,
Or there was that, or there was the opposite extreme of bands that were writing music to just desperately become famous.
Yeah.
It was like the two extremes. And I felt, some of those bands were just exhausting.
They're like trying to put these hits out, and you're like, you got to stop.
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard the cliches, and we've all seen it before, where you have the kid who's 18 with, not that I know anything about gear, but he's got super expensive gear,
Oh yeah,
and he's got 2 sleeves, and they're writing songs that sound
contrived
and just exactly like what is being played by the 10 bands who just got signed to Vagrant.
Yeah, and I think Joe Polito mentioned that too. When I don't know if this is around the same time, but he had talked about the ska bands that started doing emo music. They would change their names and they became this emo band, or the band itself. Remember when Cooter became Autopilot Off?
Yeah.
And it's like they got signed to a label and they just kept trying to push it. It's almost like you've held on to it for so long, and you just do that extra push. It's like, well, we've done it this far. Maybe we'll get that break. And it's like I would have hoped for them that they would have got it, but just like something was just missing and they couldn't. These bands just couldn't do it.
Yeah, and you probably touched on another thing there, that ska went away for the most part, and that was like half the scene back then. I feel like at that point ska was kind of going away, and all those bands went away. I mean, whenever OCG broke up and whatever other bands, the Derringers and Professor Plum and all these bands that were around then, I feel like by that point, and maybe I'm completely wrong and I'm going to sound like an asshole, but
no, I mean, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. Like I
don't remember. I don't remember by that point any of those bands. Like, I don't remember there being ska shows for the most part anymore.
Well, OCG broke up. I just did the Mike interview. They broke up in September '99, I think you said, or January. It was '99. I think it was September. Yeah, I think he said September 9th, 1999. So right around that time it's just about to hit. It's just about to turn into 2000. So that is when that went away. Yeah, so you're right. It was like they kind of started to fizzle out a little bit, and then that was around the time that Shady View Terrace came in to the scene. Remember? And then it just turned into like then Screamo started mixing in, and then like Thursday, like that was their time, and it just was this shift of this real aggressive, which I love that stuff, but I mean, it wasn't as much of a party. I felt at shows at that point.
Right. Yeah.
There was more aggression.
They started to become concerts.
Yeah. And like a fucking fashion show. Yeah, that always. I remember being so annoyed back then. I was like, this fucking fashion show, and everyone's in their fucking turtlenecks.
Yeah. I mean, big shows existed prior to that. Like there was Strung Out played at JT's, and the MXPX and the Get Up Kids and Toasters used to have huge shows at Skaters World, but
yeah,
I feel like after it all blew up and then blew up.
I don't know. Maybe just as we grew older, it just became old.
Yeah.
Like maybe we just had that was again. I think that perfect storm is where that time period was. It was what we were all looking for. We were the right age. We could travel. We didn't need anyone's permission. It was a small state. It was like the perfect time. So I think maybe by the time we got into 20s, there was maybe this pressure of college and getting jobs, and it kind of, we had to get out of that hole. Well, we can kind of dick around for a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of like balanced it. You said in the beginning, I think you said music sent you to California. Is that the way you put it?
No, acting sent me to California originally. Then I ended up at Side One after like a year of being in LA.
So okay, so you're hanging out here and you get the acting bug, you go out there, and then you found yourself just getting back into, because you said too that before that you and Flores, anyone listening, Dave was the singer of Taxi Cab Samurais, and so you guys are trying to revitalize this somehow. You get together, it's like, man, let's put some shows on, and then Hamilton Street's
Mhm.
around, and it's like you're like, wow, this is just not the same. So
Right.
you're trying to keep in that. Then you're like, oh, I have this acting bug. I want to go to California, and then you find yourself in a record label like there.
Yes.
Did you
I
like that experience?
Oh, dude, I loved it. I loved working at Side One. I loved those guys. I have nothing but fond memories of my years there.
What was it like being behind the scenes? Like, what is how was it like? Did you find that it kind of revitalized what you were missing when like things kind of died in Jersey? Like you were like, oh my God, I get to actually feel this excitement again.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, it was like rediscovering a whole new world again. That it was exactly that feeling of when I first discovered the scene. It was almost like I discovered a new scene.
That's awesome.
And there was all these new people that I was around, and these new bands, and it was so much fun, and it was super challenging, and it was just like nice to kind of be able to be involved in music. And by that point, it was like, all right, well, now I'm older and now I need to make rent. I'm not living at home anymore,
Yeah.
and I could make a living off music. Finally, I barely made a living off music, but I was able to pay rent for a few years.
Do you think it was because some of the bands because when I think when bands get signed, they're either about to write their best album or they just the album before was probably the one and the label kind of miscalculated. But I think a lot of bands around that time that were getting signed, they were putting out really good, they were putting out their best records. Do you think that being surrounded by that with Side One was kind of you got to see that freshness with bands that was exciting?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was really cool to see bands, yeah, put out that record and get to tour and make their own living off it. I didn't see that as much, I think, in the local Jersey scene as then being at Side One Dummy. Bands were able to. Side One was a very punk rock label. It was not other labels that might be big and have a staff of 60, and there's all sorts of money flying around. Like, it was a small operation. There was like 7 of us total, including the 2 owners.
Yeah, kind of like Jade
And
Tree almost.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, like I felt like Side One had that name where it's how can I explain it? It wasn't it didn't seem like a small label, but it was accessible, I think, maybe for bands to try to get on it, but they picked good music. But they also had like a persona that was like, wow, this is a respectable label.
I think one of the things with Side One, and I think it's one of the things that's allowed them continued success still today, where a lot of other labels have folded, was they never chased a trend, for better or worse. Maybe they would have had other huge hits, but they never followed those trends, and that's why they end up with bands like Flogging Molly and Gogol Bordello.
Yeah.
Who, like, there probably aren't many people out there that would have taken a chance on some of those bands, but then Flogging Molly had gold records after that.
They're actually playing. I live a block from the Red Hat Amphitheater in Raleigh, and they're playing literally. If my walls didn't exist, I would be like a football field away from where they're playing right now. They're playing outside
Oh,
in this amphitheater with Dropkick Murphys.
oh, dude, what are you talking to me for?
I never got into to either of those bands.
Yeah, I don't think I had ever listened to a Flogging Molly song until I was at Side One, and the first time we went, I went and saw them. It was just mind blowing how much fun they were.
Yeah, I could literally walk over there and just see there's like a scalp, like anyone scalping tickets outside. But I'm like, I gotta get up early tomorrow. This is 39-year-old me having this interview right now.
Hmm.
I think even like 19-year-old me would have been like, I don't know. I don't like leaving my house at 10 o'clock. I just want to be out already. Cool, man. Well, I've got a couple more questions, and I will let you get back to the wife and child in New Jersey, or in Jersey City. I did ask you before we started talking to actually write a list if there's anything you wanted to talk about. Did you do that at all?
literally everything that I had been thinking about, I managed to work into this. So.
Okay, awesome. Everyone got good information then. Um, what was one of the best local shows that you saw back in the day?
Oh.
I love when I ask that question to people. They're always like, "Oh, man."
There was, I think there's one that stands out to me, and I don't really have like, it's weird. I don't have like vivid memories of it, but I remember it happening, and I remember it was Humble and Lanemeyer and Boxcar. And I don't know if anyone else played, but those were like three of like the staples in my eyes. And it was at JT's Skate Zone. And it was just the show where it was like, oh, thank God all of these bands are playing together. It was always like Humble and Lanemeyer at one show, or Humble and Boxcar at one show. And
I always thought we always played together. I always thought the three of us were always on the same bill. Maybe I'm just not remembering this right.
I felt like it was always a combination. Obviously, there were some shows where, you all played together, but I always felt like it was some combination. It was never everyone at once.
Why did you like it? Like, was it just because of that, or was there an energy in the crowd, or you like hooked up with a really hot girl that night? Like, what was like
it definitely wasn't that.
The scene
no,
love
dude,
story.
it was all my favorite bands playing at one time. Who can beat that?
Yeah, there was always something about one show you go to and you weren't expecting it to be this big, this awesome experience, and then you're in it and you're kind of like, it's almost like sometimes you'd stop yourself and you're like, holy shit, this is gonna be something I'm gonna fucking remember.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to really, to pinpoint that. Like, I mean, I feel like I was so lucky. I got to see my favorite bands every weekend for years.
Yeah, and sometimes it'd be in front of like 20 kids, and sometimes it'd be like in front of 100. It was just, but it'd be the same lineup, and you're like, why is it so different? Maybe because it was all the time. What was your favorite venue to go to?
West Orange, American Legion, for sure.
I think we actually did say that. What? Yeah. So I mean, I talked about like the whole thing with the parking lot and the size, but like, what was there something else that was? I mean, it was also easy access off of 280 to get there from Jefferson and West Milford.
I mean, it was easy to get there, and I don't know, it just always felt like the right size venue to me. Some places, I mean, it was probably the smallest one of the bunch, but it was big enough where you could have like a solid 150 kids in there. It was just the perfect size. It was the perfect size. It was the perfect everything. There was nothing too clubby about it. Like the old dudes that ran the place were all cool and didn't care about anything. It was the perfect mix, I think, for me.
I never got a chance to go and drink at any of the bars because I could never pull off being 21. Even when I was 21, I couldn't really pull it off. Like, thank God. But sometimes my friends would, they'd go, and, Sean was always 21, so he'd always go down and sometimes have a drink or something. But I always wondering, like, it'd be kind of cool to be in that setting and just go to those bars, or even when you were driving around to see them, just to walk in there and have a beer at that place. Oh, yeah. Maybe like I can imagine sitting at that bar, and because I remember it was you walked in and the stage would be on the left with the fireplace, and then on the right there was the doorway that led to the bar.
Yep.
It's like I would love to just go in there now and sit down and drink a beer and look in that room and just like let my mind remember everything.
Dude, I might start doing that. I might go back to all those venues I visited a couple of years ago and start drinking beers at all of them.
You should. I think you just go in there and sit down and have like like a Bud Light or some beer that would have been around back then, which would have been any kind of Budweiser or Club Light. It wouldn't have been all the new craft beer that we have. Like no one was drinking Dogfish and shit back then. But yeah, just sit there and be like, man, and just try to remember all that stuff, because there is something different. There was a video that I've talked about a bunch of time where Heath Miller went back with Jack from Fun / Steel Train / Outline, and they do this thing for State Farm, and they go to Teaneck, and they're walking around, and they had redone the inside of it, and it's all different. I for the life of me, when I saw they were walking up to him, like, I don't remember there being stairs leading up to, it was like 4 stairs. I was like, I don't remember there being stairs leading up to the entrance. I always thought it was on the ground level.
Yeah, well, dude, you just gave me the idea that before that reunion show, that's where my first stop is going to be.
That's awesome. Yeah, you should, because it's like right down the street, right? Yeah, how
Yeah,
far
I
is
mean,
that from Debonair?
it can't be that far. How big is Teaneck?
That's true. It's not that big of a spot. Is yeah, dude, yeah, you should totally fucking do that. You should definitely go do that, and then send pictures and just tag people and say like I'm doing this, and then post it in the North Jersey group, and then people be like, oh shit, I'm gonna do that. All right, last question. What scene ethics do you feel like you've held on to this day?
I mean, I would say, it's kind of something that I touched on earlier was, you know, going to the scene, getting into the scene and going to those first shows and booking my first show. It was something that had always seemed like an impossible thing, and I was growing up and I was listening to music, and I never thought that I would be able to book a live show. I never thought that that would be a thing that would happen, but I kind of learned through the scene that you can do that. You just have to figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's something that I feel like I've always carried with me, whether it was, at Side One or, then I was in the Army and, now I'm working a corporate job, but I'm always still following those things and knowing that it's such a stupid cliche, but if there's a will, there's a way. There's just always a way to do it. I want to make movies, right? So I'm not getting paid $1 million to make movies, but fuck it, I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to figure out some way to do it. And maybe it'll always be a hobby and maybe it'll never be a career, but I'm going to do it. And then it was kind of, I think you mentioned it in your opening, the first episode of the podcast was you came up with the idea for a podcast. So fuck it, you're just going to do it.
Yeah.
And that same mindset is what I think I've carried on through these years.
I love it.